Well, good afternoon. It's good to be here today. Aberdeen is just right next door to San Francisco, practically, from a travel perspective. And I tried to imagine what it is that qualifies me to present to you today, and I'm afraid I could only come up with some thin evidence. I was born and raised in Texas, so they say that there must be oil in my blood, and I've spent almost 500 days submerged underwater in submarines, but I'm actually coming from the software industry, and recently have been working with Intel and Schneider Electric and others in process automation, and got volunteered for this today. So glad to be here. As Jorgen mentioned, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Silicon Valley-based software company, and we're bridging the gap between OT and IT through intelligent modeling and automation, and this broadly is known as orchestration. So that's a little bit where I'm coming from today, though I'm really speaking at the heart of the process automation industry. So I'm certain that learning about standards body is what drew you to Aberdeen today. Everybody loves talking about standards bodies, but I'll tell you that my talk today is mercifully short. So we'll get on with substance. But what is happening with OPAF and open standards actually has a lot of implications for the oil and gas industry, in fact, for all process automation. So how could I make a standards discussion interesting? Put up a couple airplanes and maybe use this as a distraction for a minute, but it's actually very central to what I want to present and communicate to you today. These are two of the most expensive aircraft systems in history. Both aircraft actually are built by Lockheed Martin, which happens to be intimately involved with OPAF. The one on the left is a F-22 air superiority fighter for the U.S. Air Force, and the one on the right is the F-35, which is a joint strike fighter for the Navy and Marines and Air Force, et cetera. And I would ask you to just pay attention a little bit to the analogies to large process automation solutions in the industry. Each aircraft type took decades to design, develop, and test. Each one is a highly integrated set of components and systems, if it's airframe, propulsion, electronics, weapons, et cetera, and sensors as well. And but last week, I came across this article in the news, and if you know anything, which I suspect you do, about very large systems that get developed and then implemented over decades and supported over decades, the statement here is really quite remarkable, that Lockheed Martin is trying to convince the U.S. Air Force to upgrade the older F-22 with a whole new suite of electronic components from the F-35. And how could this be? Actually, it's very relevant for what we're talking about here. In 2010, the Pentagon, which you may know is a very large customer in the defense industry, mandated that all suppliers establish, agree, and certify their electronic components under a program called FACE. And FACE stands for Future Aircraft Capability Environment. Okay? So what could FACE have to do with OPAF other than the Lockheed Martin connection? Well, OPAF is actually directly modeled on FACE. And the same approach that has proved so successful in the defense industry for aircraft is exactly the same approach that's being applied to OPAF. So not starting from the beginning, but really to establish what's known as a standard of standards. Okay? So that's where we're starting from for OPAF. You may know that ExxonMobil is the Pentagon in this story. for obvious reasons. They've actually recruited Lockheed Martin to head up the OPAF process, to take all of the experience of learned in face and then start applying it to process automation. So they've made a very intelligent start and approach and have built on a successful model. But it's not just oil and gas. As you'll see across here, it's really all process-intensive industries are participating in OPAF today. Of course, there's a great deal of diversity among the OT systems and sensors across these industries, but the process automation level, there is a great degree of shared technologies, and that's where OT and IT meet, which again is perhaps how I ended up here in front of you today. So although the end users are the focus of OPAF, it also involves a lot of system integrators and a lot of hardware and software solution providers. So it's really bringing everyone together under a common roof to rethink and plan for the future of process automation. So you'll see this an extraordinarily diverse group. There's an amazing amount of energy that is pouring into OPAF. The pace of acceleration, adoption, progress on the OPAF accomplishments in organization is really extraordinary. So what proved so successful in the aviation electronics example that I provided earlier was this standard of standards that I mentioned. The key is, let's take existing standards. We don't need to reinvent new standards. We don't need to come up with a new standard. Let's take existing standards, figure out where the gaps are, and then fill in. So OPAF, just like FACE, focused on how do these pieces fit together and come up with a holistic set of standards like security that encompasses and ties it all together and allows for this interoperability. So this holistic approach will produce an open architecture. And you may know that open systems have transformed the telecom industry. They've transformed the cloud industry. They've transformed, again, the aviation industry in the defense segment. And it is proven very successful and successfully adapted and adopted elsewhere. These open architectures, the goal is to provide security standards from end to end that's compliant with other accepted standards, and an architecture that will make components from different vendors swappable, tunable, and most importantly, certified. So when you switch one component for another, you'll know that it's already been tested to a set of standards that you can verify. Well, I guess the big question is why? Why would this be important? We're in an age of tremendous transformation. I live in Menlo Park, California, adjacent to Stanford University, right in the heart, literally right at the center of Silicon Valley. And in fact, I live just a few miles from Facebook. That's actually a complaint. That's not a compliment. They've driven house prices up in my area beyond any reasonable means. But this tremendous innovation is really creating an awareness and hunger for whole new levels of flexibility, that processes that can change and adapt, that can improve operating margins. As digital threats increase, systems that can change and upgrade their defense posture become very important. How about lowering process automation life cycles to years instead of decades? Or to make plant and process improvement on the fly instead of requiring it expensive shutdowns, just the ability to raise the overall utilization of the plant. In short, OPAF's goal is for you to make your F-22 plant as new as your F-35, using my analogy there, with a lot less effort, expense, and disruption to your business. So you can change hardware components and keep the software components, or you can upgrade software components on different hardware components. And you can choose the best in class. Just focus in just a little bit on exactly the scope of OPAF. I think it's very important to understand, what it encompasses, and perhaps even more important to understand what it doesn't. So it's focused on the heart of the process automation systems, and only the process automation systems. Devices, safety systems, instrumentation, these are all unaffected by OPAF. So the fundamental drivers for OPAF adoption are, first of all, it's increasingly a global market. We're all in global markets, whether it's technology, oil and gas, or chemical, or food and beverage. And there are ever-growing pressures on productivity, on waste reduction, on capital efficiency and how it gets deployed, on environmental regulations. Number two, I think for closed systems, it's going to be hard to justify large capital investments in new plant systems that are inflexible and closed, locking in potentially uncompetitive operational costs after just a few years. That's what happens in this time of innovation, that you want to maintain flexibility. And lastly, I've just mentioned security. The security threat today is less than the security threat of tomorrow. And that's going to be true probably for the rest of our lifetimes, right? The security threat is not going to go away. It's not going to magically get simpler. In fact, the threat continues to evolve and is amorphous and becomes more pervasive. So operations, closed systems, and security. So again, just to make the point of what is OPAF thinking about, what does it look like? It's really a before and after. Before on the left, after on the right. We're all accustomed to the fully integrated soup to nuts systems that have served very well over the last 50 plus years. What OPAF is working towards is defining the boundaries between these different systems and creating specs that allow them to be interoperable so that you can upgrade any one of these components as you go. You can keep the application. You can port in an application from another vendor, whatever is the best of breed that comes online. I know you're all aware and have heard a lot about machine learning and artificial intelligence and all kinds of new diagnostics and big data analytics. And they will be implemented in some regards on a regular basis that will have profound effects on your operations. So the after in this picture is modular, interchangeable, and the software is portable. So in summary, usually everybody breathes a little sigh of relief here, particularly in the standards discussion. In summary, OPAF is the way forward to usher in operational flexibility, performance, and efficiency that Industry 4.0 promises. I know you've heard a lot about Industry 4.0, and it really will be implemented no more centrally than in process automation. The second, it'll be open, future-proof solutions. And really, this is a must. This is not optional. If you think about competing globally with new plants, new equipment, and new efficiencies, it's very hard to justify systems that are difficult to upgrade and difficult to keep pace. And lastly, OPAF sets in place a holistic security framework to combat the increasing threat and the increasing consequence of security threats. So hopefully I've made some sort of case as to the benefits, as to where OPAF is going and what it provides. I just want to highlight a few more. If you still need further argument, let me just take a moment of two. One is larger pool of modern software development talent. I'm not sure how many of you are COBOL programmers, but the being beholden to some of those old technologies really limits the talent pool that you can draw from. And so with OPAF, you get kind of a constant modern architecture that allows you to tap into a much broader pool of development talent. And the other thing I'll point out is that it enables continuous innovation. And again, I would go back to where I started, is that we live in a time of unprecedented innovation. You can imagine that all of the hundreds of billions of dollars that the Pentagon spent on the F-22 system, in this era, that plane was almost obsolete, as advanced as it was, almost obsolete when it came off, because it was a closed system. And they put a lot of effort into the F-35, and you should be thinking along similar lines for your operations. So I'll close with this, which is OPAF is a member-led, member-directed consortium of companies. And if you're not involved, or if your company's not involved, now is the time. I know that ABB is very involved, Schneider Electric, Siemens, Lockheed Martin, Honeywell, and ExxonMobil. I'm trying to think of some of the other end users, but it's a very wide variety. And if you're not involved, or if you're thinking about it, it's a good time to get involved, because what gets decided today is really what we're all going to live with in the future. This will become the new standard for process automation. And I like to emphasize that, yes, the train is leaving the station. So hoping OPAF will go away may not be a good strategy anymore. And I've certainly heard that among some in the industry. So your company and your process and your industry need an active voice to defend your own interest. And the best way to benefit from this change is to participate in it and to invent it. So this is the call to action, right? I'm on the outreach committee for OPAF, and this is, if you have any questions, take a picture of this, forward it to the person in your organization who should be thinking about this or making these kinds of decisions, and I'll get a little star by my name in the OPAF group, and but it might actually mean that I have to do this more often, so I'm not exactly sure how I feel about that. But it is this is how to get involved and how to get more information, at least. And I'll just point out that a couple of my colleagues helped me prepare this, and if there are any errors or omissions, these are the ones responsible. So anyway, thank you so much for your attention.